Letting go of someone who doesn't value you is not simply about ending a relationship. It's about confronting the deep emotional rupture that lingers beneath the surface. Carl Jung taught that our outer experiences reflect the conditions of our inner world. When a person remains entangled in a relationship where their worth is diminished, it is often because they have not yet fully awakened to their own inherent value. The pain of not being valued, then, is more than interpersonal disappointment. It is a confrontation with the unconscious, where unresolved wounds still linger. Jung believed that healing requires self-observation, and that the people we attract are often mirrors of our own psyche. Being devalued by another forces us to examine where internally we have devalued ourselves. This pain serves a purpose. It signals the start of individuation, the process Jung described as becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self. Letting go, therefore, becomes not an act of defeat, but a sacred step towards self-love and inner unity. When someone stays in a relationship where they are consistently undervalued, it's rarely just about love. It's about an unconscious pattern being replayed. Carl Jung believed that the psyche operates through recurring cycles, many of which are hidden beneath our awareness. These repetitions are not accidents. They are what Jung referred to as manifestations of the shadow, the part of ourselves that contains the wounds, fears, and suppressed memories we prefer not to face. The dynamics we recreate in our relationships are often reflections of unresolved childhood imprints. A person may find themselves clinging to someone emotionally unavailable, not because they enjoy the pain, but because it feels hauntingly familiar. Jung emphasized that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Repeating these harmful patterns becomes a way of unconsciously seeking resolution, hoping the story will end differently this time. But healing begins when one finally breaks the cycle, when they stop chasing validation and start observing the inner script that created the chase in the first place. Many people carry the unconscious belief that love must be earned through sacrifice. This belief, deeply rooted in early emotional conditioning, creates a cycle where they give endlessly, even to those who do not reciprocate. Carl Jung understood this as a distortion emerging from the underscore shadow self, where suppressed insecurities and unmet childhood needs continue to influence adult behavior. When someone clings to a relationship that depletes them, they are often trying to rewrite an old story, one where they finally become enough to deserve love. Jung taught that the self cannot flourish while it remains enslaved to these internal narratives. He believed that individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires the integration of painful truths. Letting go, then, is not a punishment or surrender. It is the conscious refusal to continue proving one's worth to those who fail to see it. True love, according to Jungian wisdom, does not demand suffering. It arises from mutual recognition between two whole individuals. Choosing to walk away is not a rejection of love, but a commitment to a higher form of it, one that begins within. The act of letting go may appear simple, but the real struggle lies in the emotional resistance that follows. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious mind clings to what is familiar, even when it brings pain. This is why so many people stay in relationships that no longer nourish them, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of loneliness, fear of starting again. Jung understood this fear as a defense mechanism of the ego, designed to protect the psyche from chaos and uncertainty. But the price of staying is often greater than the fear of leaving. When someone chooses to stay in suffering simply because it is predictable, they are resisting their own growth. Jung believed that transformation requires a descent into the unknown, a confrontation with what the ego tries to avoid. Letting go becomes a sacred act of courage. It is the soul's way of stepping into the void, not to be lost, but to be reborn. For beyond the resistance lies peace, and beyond fear, freedom. One of Carl Jung's most profound insights was his concept of projection, the tendency to see in others what we have not yet acknowledged within ourselves. When someone feels unseen, unloved, or disrespected by another, it often reflects a deeper truth, a lack of self-recognition, instead of asking, "Why don't they value me?" The more transformative question becomes, in what ways have I failed to value myself? Jung taught that the unconscious expresses itself through what obsesses us, disturbs us, or repeatedly shows up in our lives. These aren't coincidences. They are invitations to deeper awareness. Being mistreated by someone is painful, but continuing to tolerate it signals a misalignment within. Self-reflection allows us to trace the roots of that misalignment, to see where we've compromised, silenced ourselves, or settled for less. And the moment we begin to see clearly, the outer world shifts. For as Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Letting go is not a reaction, it is a revelation born from inner clarity. To let go of someone who doesn't value you is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-love. Carl Jung emphasized that true healing begins when we turn inward, when we stop expecting the outer world to provide what only the self can give. Many remain in unfulfilling relationships not out of love, but out of guilt, history, or the illusion that time invested equals worth. But Jung taught that the measure of a relationship is not in its length, but in how it contributes to our psychological evolution. Letting go, then, is not about discarding a person. It is about releasing the internal pattern that kept you dependent on external validation. It is the moment you affirm, "I am enough," and act accordingly. As Jung described in the process of individuation, only by shedding what no longer aligns with the self can one move toward wholeness. The ego may resist, whispering that walking away is failure. But the soul knows better. It knows that choosing yourself is never a loss, but the beginning of everything real. One of the most difficult traps to escape is the hope that things will one day change, that if we just love harder, wait longer, or sacrifice more, the other person will finally see our worth. Carl Jung warned that clinging to false hope is often a defense of the ego, which desperately seeks resolution to avoid pain. But hope, when misdirected, can become a prison, a cycle where the self keeps returning to a relationship that has already revealed its truth. Jung taught that transformation begins with acceptance, the ability to see clearly without illusion. If a dynamic has remained unchanged despite your best efforts, it is not because you failed, but because the other person is on a different path, perhaps not yet ready for growth. As Jung noted, no one changes unless they are first willing to confront their own shadow. And that confrontation cannot be forced from the outside. Letting go without expectation, not to provoke guilt, not to inspire regret, is one of the most powerful decisions a person can make. It's a declaration. I no longer wait for love. I choose it within myself. Letting go is not a moment. It is a process. Carl Jung taught that true transformation is never instantaneous. It unfolds in layers, often through discomfort and eternal resistance. After physically walking away from someone who doesn't value you, the real challenge begins, detaching emotionally from the bond that once defined your identity. There will be moments of longing, nostalgia, and doubt. The unconscious mind will try to lure you back into old patterns simply because they are familiar. Jung believed the unconscious clings to the past not out of malice, but out of a desire for stability. But this stability is often rooted in suffering. To detach is to slowly rewire the internal narrative that tied your worth to another person's presence. Each time you resist the urge to return, each day you choose not to reach out, you affirm your evolution. Self-love becomes a practice, not in grand declarations, but in quiet, consistent choices. And as Jung noted, by making the unconscious conscious, we stop being victims of repetition and start becoming authors of our own lives. To many, solitude feels like punishment, an empty space where love once lived. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed solitude was not a void to be feared, but a sacred space for inner listening. In solitude, the noise fades. The distractions of unbalanced relationships dissolve. And what remains is the voice of the self, the part of us that is often silenced in the pursuit of others' approval. Jung taught that fear of being alone is a projection of the shadow, the disowned part of the psyche that equates stillness with abandonment. But when one learns to embrace solitude, they no longer view aloneness as lack. They see it as an invitation, a time to reconnect with what is real, raw, and authentic within. Many people grieve not the person, but the fantasy they built around them. Clinging to the what could have been delays healing. Letting go, then, is also letting go of the illusion. And through solitude, as Jung believed, the self finds clarity, not through others, but through communion with its own truth. There comes a moment, quiet but profound, when a person realizes that letting go was never about losing someone else. It was about rediscovering themselves. Carl Jung taught that the external world is a mirror of the inner self, and when we finally release what no longer values us, that mirror begins to change. The energy shifts. Life begins to respond in new, unexpected ways. People who align with our true essence start to appear, not because the universe is magical, but because our frequency has evolved. Jung spoke of synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that emerge when we are aligned with our deeper purpose. These synchronicities often appear after we have taken a courageous step toward our own truth. Letting go sends a clear message to the unconscious. I am ready, ready to stop repeating, ready to grow, ready to receive. In that awakening, life begins anew, not with desperation, but with self-trust. Not from emptiness, but from wholeness. As Jung so often reminded us, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes.